I want to speak about how the coronavirus crisis has exposed Australia's and indeed the world's unhealthy reliance on China for essential goods, particularly medical equipment and pharmaceuticals. We currently import over 90% of medicines with a key dependency on China, according to a report by the Institute for Integrated Economic Research, which concluded that Australia is particularly vulnerable to medicine shortages arising from factors outside our control, and that we have effectively outsourced almost all of our medicine supply chain to the global market. Even the drugs we import from the US are typically dependent on supplies from China. The report follows extensive US research into China's dominance of the pharmaceutical supply chain, a fact that was deemed a risk to national security in US Congressional Commission hearings last year. The US imports 95% of ibuprofen, 91% of hydrocortisone, and more than 80% of antibiotics, and much more. While the US remains a leader in research, much of the manufacturing has progressively moved to China since the 1990s, with the country now enjoying a virtual monopoly on a number of essential ingredients. China also produces half of the world's supply of surgical masks, and though it dramatically increased production after the coronavirus outbreak, it initially hoarded the supplies for its own use, as well as buying a significant percentage of the world's remaining supply. In a single day in January, China imported 20 million respirators and masks. And of course, we've learnt in recent days that tons of medical supplies were sent from Australia to China in February. Our dependence on China would be a concern even if the global superpower was a benevolent, democratic nation with shared values with the West. But it's nothing of the sort. China is not our friend. The Chinese communist regime does not have our best interests at heart, nor does it embrace the values of democracy, free speech or free trade. A regime that brutally oppresses its own citizens, subjects innocent people to arbitrary detention and torture, engages in politically motivated prosecutions, locks up and even executes political dissidents, and has developed a frightening North Korea-style social credit system, is not a regime to be trusted. Let's never forget that at the outset of this coronavirus outbreak, China ordered lab samples to be destroyed and arrested doctors working at the coalface who tried to warn others of the highly infectious virus spreading in Wuhan. China also systematically persecutes religious minorities, including putting 1 million Uyghurs in camps where they are subjected to horrifying mistreatment. But these human rights abuses are largely ignored by the international community because of China's incredible trading power. Successive governments in the West from all political stripes have effectively sacrificed their manufacturing sectors to China. While our governments think in the short term from election to election, China takes a long-term strategic approach to increasing its power and influence across the world. It is imperative that we now take practical steps to ensure medical supply security and ensure we are fully prepared for the next global pandemic.